Hello, everybody, and welcome to the last session at the Spring Commercial Vehicle Business Summit 2024. It's been a great 2 days. I've learned a lot. There's some of the sessions that because I was involved with other ones I couldn't listen to, so I'm very excited that within the next couple of weeks, we'll be letting you know when and where the video recordings of all the sessions will be available. And of course, we really appreciate that you came and helped us talk through connecting the dots. I'm very excited because this is like the icing on the top of the cake, or the cherry on top of the icing, or both actually, which is my favorite futurist is Steve Greenfield. And I'm going to let him tell you just a little bit about himself, but I wanted you to know first that Steve and I have known each other now for a while. We have a friend relationship in addition to a professional one. We were talking about foodie. When we go to events and stuff like that, we always get together to find some interesting place to eat. But the other part of it is that I keep nagging him to make sure that in his view of the retail part of the business, that he keeps thinking about the fact that there is this funny little commercial section, right? And so, initially he had a diagram of a dealer's layout, and I made him add a department, right? But I think what's happening now, Steve, is that you're seeing kind of like the shift that's happening in the overarching automotive space that might mean that commercial is a little bit more important than everybody thought.
Yeah, I think that's right. Well, thanks for having me back. It's always a joy, Kathryn, whenever we get together virtually or face to face. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks, and we'll grab another meal together. But no, I think you're exactly right. Shame on people like me that don't think of commercial first. But I think more and more dealers across the U.S. and North America are really understanding now that not only embracing commercial can address a big and growing segment of profitable business, but also it's somewhat counter-cyclical, right? We've had this great couple of years, largely led by supply shortages on the new side through COVID, where margins have been very high for car dealers. But we're also starting to see, as inventory start to mount, they're starting to get back. The margins are starting to come back down to earth, and I think that that's going to come down very, very quickly. So a dealer that has invested in building up, a new revenue stream around commercial can look to that to be, whether it's counter-cyclical or not, at least being recession resistant.
Yes. And I didn't mean to short circuit your credentials, because you have had quite a career on the retail side of the business. And so tell the audience a little bit about that, because you certainly can see it from that perspective.
Yeah, well, thanks. I mean, I've been lucky enough to stumble into this industry like many of us, but at this point, I've had about 25 years worth of experience, mostly on marketplaces. 10 years at the largest auction wholesale marketplace, Manheim, and then 5 years at Auto Trader, overseeing acquisitions, and then a couple of years at TrueCar, a publicly traded competitor to Auto Trader that's focused more on new passenger vehicles. And then as of 4 years ago, almost exactly, decided that venture capital was going to be the next chapter for me. So we're in the process of raising our third fund. We've deployed capital into 28 companies now across these three different funds, and very excited to have a view and a hypothesis around what the future might hold across the entire mobility spectrum, not only ground transportation and commercial specifically. And we're looking for early stage entrepreneurs who are innovating and are going to take advantage of some of these trends that are beginning to form across the mobility ecosystem.
And I like that you use the word mobility. I will say, from my perspective, having started in the commercial space in 2007, mobility was the word that was used for ramps and lifts for vehicles that have been modified for people that had handicaps, right?
Right,
And it
right.
was a few years ago, and all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, we're using that word completely differently now.
Yeah.
But it's been perfect, because it really is a broad look at what moving things around looks like, people and things, right?
Yeah, I mean, our framework that I like to explain to people is however we move, to your point, humans or cargo across the modalities of land, sea, air, or space. So it's kind of a 2x4 grid. It's kind of fair game for us. And, frankly, as you look at your definition of quote unquote commercial checks a lot of boxes across all of those segments.
Hmm. Well, commercial vehicles support 80% of our GDP. I
Mhm.
mean, when you stop and think about that, and when you think about what happened in 2020, 21, where, the essential businesses just kept operating when the rest of us were, not, that's why it is a very consistent recession-proof space. It's also really critical and really important, right? And so I think it's time. We only have two slides. My favorite slide, which shows the folks, the end customers, right? But also I like showing this because, Steve's familiar with all of these on the retail side of the business. But on the commercial side of the business, each one of these life cycle of the commercial vehicle is likely pretty different.
Mhm.
And that's
Mhm.
because the goal is different, right? So finance is different, and it's different because the customer is different and the customer's goals are different. So I'm not going to go through every single one of them, but this kind of gives us a framework to understand why it's a segment that needs to be focused on uniquely and why it's a big opportunity, quite frankly, right?
Yeah, it's a great encapsulation of, I think, the interwoven ecosystem here. Interestingly enough, as I look at this, we've actually made some investments in early stage companies. For example, on the wrap side, a company called WrapMate that
Yep.
does a lot of commercial installations of vinyl wraps for small and medium businesses on commercial vehicles. We invested in the telematics space and the maintenance space, a company out of Toronto called Pit Stop that's doing predictive maintenance for fleet customers, trying to
Mhm.
understand getting ahead of like routine maintenance and finding when critical components may fail. And
Yep.
then, in the tire space and maintenance more broadly, we invested in a company called New Brakes that's doing, remote maintenance for fleet companies as well. So, it is good. You and I could literally it's something for us to think about for our next chapter. You could
Uh-huh.
launch an early stage venture capital fund, and this could be your thesis, right? That the total addressable market is very large, and then there are all these different facets where innovation is occurring and has yet to occur, and we could go hunting for early stage entrepreneurs who are
Yeah.
innovating in these specific areas. It's a good
Well,
investment thesis.
I would love that. And what's interesting is some of the ones that you were talking about may have started with the idea of retail automotive.
Right.
But once they got into it, they realized that where adoption actually happens is when a business finds a value that, throws in and helps their total cost of ownership or their total cost of whatever. And that's where adoption happens. And in fact, Steve and I, a couple of weeks ago, we were in Phoenix. I'm just trying to remember for a minute. And I was on a panel earlier in the day, and then Steve was in kind of like this little debate later in the day. But it was all about, electric vehicle remarketing and what the value was and how that was, just in general, how that adoption was going. And on the panel, I was the only one talking about the commercial aspects of it and,
Mhm.
how adoption happens in business space as opposed to retail, right? And people like the emotional aspect of wanting to be an early adopter, wanting to, help with green, all these kinds of things. But on the business side, it's completely different. And
Mhm.
I think that, listening to you and Scott kind of talk about how it's going to get adopted and where it's going, there was a little tiny piece missing, which is, like what's happening with big companies. And over the course of these 2 days, one thing that I learned that I didn't know before is that the utility companies
Mhm.
are creating marketplaces, Steve. They're creating marketplaces to tell people about the TCO
Yep.
the total, and the biggest target for them are businesses.
Right.
So, yeah, you
Yeah.
know me, I get crazy excited about commercial.
No, I think it is good. As you look at alternative drivetrains, whether it's electric or hydrogen, right? I think we're starting to see more evidence now that there are strong use cases in commercial for either hydrogen or electric. More immediately electric, longer term, maybe hydrogen, but we're also seeing where there aren't use cases, right? So just
Yeah,
general long haul trucking, for example,
right.
electric isn't going to work. But having said that, on fixed routes, where it's very predictable and you get the same trucks going on the same routes. And this would apply to school buses, garbage
Yes.
collection, or
Yep.
even longer haul routes. Then you can put the proper electrical or hydrogen infrastructure along those
Correct.
routes at the right intervals to make
Right.
sure that it can be a great alternative. So I think that coupling, you and I were talking, in the green room before this, but coupling the right infrastructure investments to
Hmm.
anticipate what the needs are for the
Right.
commercial use cases is very important. But we're going to see a lot of electrification of like depots where these heavy vehicles are parked at night,
Hmm.
especially if they're on predictable short routes that lend
Hmm.
themselves more to alternative energy sources. So where we've seen the friction, I think, and this may resonate with some of the people on the call today, is when just general fleets are looking at, oh, I need to electrify a certain proportion of my vehicles without the focus around thinking about like, is this feasible and scalable? And you can't have every single vehicle right now, at least within a commercial fleet, that flips over to electric. But for certain vehicles within the fleet, there are strong use cases.
Size of the fleet, geography of the fleet, which Scott had a really great chart that showed how fast coal takes electric down, right? Range
Yep.
down, right?
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And use case. Those are the primaries. And so yesterday we had a guy, there's a company in the UK called Dynamon, and James Slatter is the general manager, and I met him at a Fleet Forward event that Bobbitt puts on every year. And their company got started during the London Olympics, and they started building a simulation software, and so it's had a number of years now to continue to create more and more functionality. And what they can do is they can plug in all of the telematics, the use, the vehicles themselves, all sorts of stuff, and calculate what would be the correct vehicles to start with in adoption. Like kind
Great.
of identify, because there's so much data.
Mhm.
Like, the human brain can't actually do that without assistance, I don't
Right.
think. I
Yeah.
love simulations. They're a great tool. They're a little complicated and people may still be a little, afraid of that. Today we had one of my friends, Philippe Bousseau, talked about how to kind of a strategy for growth, which included doing a lot of metrics and calculations, sort of like a Swiss watch. And
Mhm.
I listen to it and I go, this is the way it's going to go. It's just hard for people to kind of transition from, you know, I'm not saying handshakes are wrong. I'm saying a handshake and then the work that you need to do needs to be, data and metrics so that you know how to improve and where you are.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And you've been a keen student of that, and I think manifested that in terms of work truck solutions into some clever database products that you've innovated over the years that really help this ecosystem out.
It's still, I think yeah, I appreciate that. And it's a nice thought. It is, the helping the industry is a really my strongest motivator. I feel like the rate of change is speeding up, and that makes me really happy because it's been lots of little tiny incremental positive movements over a long period of time, which first of all isn't in my nature.
Right, right.
But I did it, and it was important. It was how things had to happen, and then of course, the pandemic really kind of triggered a lot of things. And for me, it's when you get into an environment where the external pressure of so the phrase that I've always loved is change is what happens when the pain of change is less than the pain of staying the same.
Mhm,
And I think
mhm,
that's what's happening. The external pressures are really pressing, whether it's regulatory, whether it's social, whether it's competitive,
mhm.
whether it's, just, like Philippe said, if he used a quote from a guy from Logitech, which was there's two states of being. You're either growing or you're dead,
Right, right.
you know? Anyway.
Yeah. So let me ask you, I mean, I'll flip the script a little bit here, but now we've come to the end of the conference. As you look back at the content that was presented, what do you hope the three takeaways are for folks that have, attended the last day?
I think takeaway number one, based on the theme and the fact that we really proved it all the way through, that is, we need to collaborate, we need to have partners, and we need to hold hands, connecting the dots, both internally and externally, to be able to go through this time period that we're in right now, which
Right.
is fast change, like very rapid things happening. And I loved it. Every single one of the sessions had a different view of it, but it was all it all nailed it down that's what's really important right now. And I think
Mhm,
that kind of leads to, that means you have to be flexible,
mhm,
you need to be open, right, and
mhm, mhm.
flexible, and communicative, and get out of that protective. If I tell anybody something, I'm giving them some advantage over me, right?
Right.
Um, I think, you know, the second thing that I would say is that balance between technology and humanity.
Mhm.
You know, we are fortunate. I'm not a. I've been involved with technology my whole life after a certain age because there wasn't any before that. And to me, it's always been a way to improve life,
Right.
not technology because technology is cool, right? Or I can carry my phone around with me and be locked into it 24/7. To me, it's always been something that is a tool. And I think we covered a bunch of that in this around it's the human part, right? That
Mhm,
that really ultimately is going to get us there.
mhm.
And being able to use technology to support the humanity of what we need to do.
Right. That's great. Makes a lot of sense.
And three, I don't know, just so many really cool people. Like every single one of our panels, and I like to think that the people that are smart enough to attend or to watch our sessions later, that's what's going to make this all work, right?
Yeah, well, if nothing else, you're a good connector of folks from, the years that, you and I spent together. People like you, like the company, and that's half the battle, I think, when you're building a business like this.
Well, you have to do it. You have to do what you say you're going to do.
Right,
That's
right.
the most important thing.
Yeah.
Say it, figure it out together, and then do what you say you're going to do. And it's so easy to lose trust. Trust is such an important part in this, and I think everywhere, but this industry is particularly small in how
Hmm.
big it is.
Hmm.
I was in
Agreed.
the cable television industry for a number of years, too many, and the culture in that industry was not at all like that.
Right.
It was um, very locked down and very for a nickel. Um, I'll stab you in the back, and yeah, it was, and I'm just so grateful to be in a space where, our whole hardworking, salt of the earth, backbone of the U.S. economy space, right?
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. What has you most excited over the next 18 months?
The next 18 months. Ooh, hmm, we are working on some really interesting partnerships. So that's kind of what started triggering the theme here as I went,
Hmm.
oh, great, we can move forward faster if we're working with some folks with data and that have access to certain types of data that will help not only our dealers, but their customers.
Right.
Oh, we can help with some financial technology. We can help with transport. We can help, but we're not going to build all that stuff. And so
Right.
literally, Steve, for the last year or so, I've been spending a lot of time, I guess I would say, vetting people,
Right.
because that's what part of our job, I think, is, we're not going to do a partnership with somebody that isn't going to do say what they're going to do and then do what they say they're going to do,
Right.
right?
Right.
And for our customers and for our dealers and for their customers. So I would think that we're going to have, I don't know if we'll have a series of announcements or anything, because we've already announced that we're doing some partnerships, but I think we'll have some case studies of how we've actually then moved the needle.
Right. That's great.
Simple,
Very exciting.
made it more efficient, you know, maybe even moved closer to, so help me, Steve, you're really creative. I need to come up with a different name than um, uh, retail. Oh, now I can't even remember what it's called. Um, online, what's it called when you can buy a car online?
Oh, like online retailing or?
Yeah, online retailing. Yeah. So
Okay.
I can't call it that because it's not retail, right?
Right, right, right.
You have to come like digital retailing, online retailing, or maybe it's commercialing.
Commercialing. I like it. There, you got a new verb. Right.
Oh, so what about you? Where you're off to, you're a traveling guy. You're going to be in presenting 3 places in the next couple of weeks, right?
Yeah, I've got a couple of international trips coming up, which I'm really flattered. I'm trying to do more of these mobility conferences internationally. So I've got an automotive related marketplace conference in Amsterdam coming up in the next month. And at the end of this month, I'm over in Doha, Qatar, of all places. They've
Hmm.
got an autonomous mobility conference there, and I'm the kickoff keynote. So I hope to do, I've done a lot of these conferences here in the US, but hopefully I'll get on the international stage a little bit more, which opened up a few things, right? One, from a
Right.
fundraising standpoint,
Sure.
potential investors overseas, but equally important, if not more important, making sure that entrepreneurs around the world know that we're willing to invest in anything mobility related early stage.
Hmm.
So we'd like to do more international. We've done 28 investments now in the last 3.5 years, and only 3 of them are international. But we are very open to and meet with entrepreneurs from around the globe every month. So yeah, so it's good, and interspersing some of the domestic conferences here in the U.S. with some international also makes things exciting.
When I first, my very first National Truck Equipment Association Executive Summit. So they started this once a year. It started as a 3-day event. It's about a day and a half now, but it's all about, talking at a little bit higher level about what vocational trucks and vans look like. And that first one, some of the presenters, I was like, okay, international's not the same here as it is overseas, right?
Mm, mm.
It's not. But guess what? Over the last one, I guess that's been 10 years or something since I went to the first one. Um, it's become more and more the same. The actual vehicles have become more standardized. The kind of upfits, and it makes sense, because why would you just want to have your product only fit for one market, right?
Right,
If
right.
you're an OEM or if you're an upfitter. So um, over the last year, I've had interesting conversations with folks who are in Europe about how they do their commercial. And I don't think it's as far away as it was, but it's still, we haven't even addressed how does Canada compare to the US
Right, right,
from a perspective of our platform, right?
right.
Getting close, but so really focused on helping get through all of the pressure right now on the dealers to become fleet management partners
Right.
for the 65% of fleets in the United States that are 10 vehicles or smaller.
Wow, it's amazing, huh?
But a big opportunity. And the OEMs are producing services like fleet management technologies, telematics, charging or gas cards, maintenance, mobile maintenance, all that kind of stuff it gives them a whole toolbox of ways to help the smaller business, the small to medium business, not have to worry about like 10 things. Instead, they have a good relationship with someone who can help them with at least 8 of them, right?
Right. And do you think that more of the automakers are going to formalize their commercial business? Because,
Did you
we
see
see,
the announcement that Stellantis did?
I did. And I wonder, if we're going to see more of that because they're realizing one, I mean, you look at Ford's numbers, they report huge profitability within that division.
Right.
I gotta imagine other automakers are looking at it and saying, hey, maybe we should double down on our commercial infrastructure.
Well, so Ford launched Ford Pro 2 years ago. GM launched GM Envolve
Hmm.
last year.
Hmm.
Stellantis just launched Stellantis Pro One
Hmm.
and their Ram Pro product.
Hmm.
I think we're there. And, then I was thinking about this after we, coming back from talking about EVs and remarketing and, valuation, all that. Some of the big questions happen. Well, what do you do? How comfortable are people that the company they're going to buy a product from is still going to be around, right?
Right.
And I've
Yep.
got a slide in the opening session that shows, I don't know, I'm going to say 20 different EV OEMs, new
Yep.
ones.
Hmm.
A few of them are actually part of a traditional ICE OEM, but most of them are brand new. And I started thinking about how sad it would be, like early days in automotive, there were hundreds of companies that started up and not that many survived.
Right.
And so I was kind of talking to somebody about that. And then all of a sudden I went, but what's really cool in the commercial space is each one of them are really carving out a very unique set of use cases
Hmm.
for
Hmm.
their, like, the class and then the style,
Hmm.
because that works for a particular set of use cases. And so there's actually probably room for a lot more than you would think, like on the retail side, right? There's let's not let the Chinese in, right? We've got enough competition on electric vehicles for consumers, would be the kind of the attitude, right?
Right.
Uh,
Right.
so yeah, that made me feel better because I know these folks are investing a lot of money. They're working really, really hard. There's a lot of challenges in early days of this.